I worry about the Andrew Tate effect.
Why do you keep talking about Andrew Tate? Is this the only person you can mention?
No, he's very prominent in how he influences young men.
He's one person.
And there's a lot of trafficking that happens that isn't also on the internet. What is exploitation and what is a choice?
Everyone has the right to wake up every day and feel safe when they go to work.
You have all argued for regulation, so you lot have to say no to this one.
Members of the jury, you must try to reach a unanimous decision on the following. Should all sex work be decriminalised? You have 20 minutes until the first vote. Should we start off with Eva? I'm going to come to you.
Why me?
I wonder why.
So before I started working as a sex worker, I'm a dominatrix now. I've been an escort, I've worked in brothels, I've worked in massage parlors. I also kind of didn't have an idea of what sex work was about. I had a little bit of a recoil when I thought about payment around sex, but over time, I've educated myself, I've been in the lived experience, and my current vote is that sex work should be decriminalised. I'm available, ask me your questions.
Oh.
I wasn't talking about getting hired, Stas.
Now, I thought it might be helpful if I just set out what the legal position is in England and Wales, because it's a bit grey compared to other countries. At the moment, it is legal for two consenting adults to pay for sexual services. However, what is criminalised are the acts that may be associated with that. So, it's not legal to solicit for sex, for payment. It's not legal to curb crawls. It's not legal to drive a vehicle looking for paid sex workers. It is not legal to keep or to manage a brothel. And also it's not legal to pimp or control a sex worker for profit. Okay, so you're for the decriminalisation.
I'm for the decriminalisation.
Is anyone against the decriminalisation? Oh, Nikki, Gen Z.
Oh, please tell.
Yeah, so I think we've got a lot of sex work that goes on online anyways, like OnlyFans, we've got the access to pornography, which is very easily done and stuff like that. As you said, it is legal to do as two consenting adults, but I don't really see what the benefit of legalising things like brothels or pimping or curb crawling. If we decriminalise sex work, such as brothels or pimping, do you think that that would feed further in to the problem that we are having currently with how sex work already impacts society? If you look at Andrew Tate and everything that what happened with him abroad, like in Romania, it would be a lot more difficult to prove that what was going on there was wrong if we legalised brothels and stuff like that, even though people are being mistreated and exploited. Yeah.
So you're saying it's a good threshold to have.
Yeah.
Because once you say you can't have a brothel at all, you don't even need to explore the question of whether or not somebody's been exploited.
Yeah.
Anyone else think that that it should not be decriminalised?
Well, I like where we are at the moment, and I think it's fine for consenting adults to pay each other whatever they want to pay each other, and it is absolutely fine for Eva to do whatever Eva wants to do, but
thank you.
I'm worried. I know, and I bet you're really grateful that I've allowed you to do that. But at the same time, there's making money out of it by pimping, by managing brothels. There's curb crawling and soliciting. Maybe that's the one I'm a bit wobbly on.
Okay.
Thank you. I'll give my kind of rebuttal on this and then add hopefully a little bit more context and flavour after. Should all sex work be decriminalised? Yes. It's the oldest profession in the world, isn't it, right? It goes back to, I think, the Egyptians. I think it's a fairy tale to think that it won't continue or wouldn't continue. So decriminalising it and making it legal and providing support, infrastructure, funding, legalisation, more help from police, I think would be a net positive and benefit to society.
Okay.
I personally think that by keeping it criminalised is what pushes it into the back streets, into the seedy kind of place that you think you would do it. I think if you legalise it, like Amsterdam, you got the red light district. It's controlled. You got, like you said, you got to do your
Not a great model,
STIs.
Amsterdam, though.
No, but my
yeah.
point is, you got a place to go. You have to be checked for STIs, for this, for that. There's governs and there's regulations and rules, so it's acceptable. It's always going to happen, no matter what whether you legalise it or not. It will always happen. So why not legalise it so that you can monitor it and actually put a proper structure in place, support and stuff like that.
Yeah, I think I kind of fall in line with Stas, really. I think it's about the protection of the person. People that have like a moral or a morality stance on it, I don't really see that, to be honest. If I'm morally against sex work and paying for sex work, whether you criminalise it or decriminalise it, doesn't make a difference. I'm not going to pay for it. So my morals are my morals, regardless of what the criminal status is. So really, I just wanted to go back to Eva and ask about like specific dealings of people in the industry and how do they feel protected? Do you feel protected? Do you feel like you can go to the police safely, or are you in fear of prosecution?
So I am lucky that I got to work and start working in a decriminalised place, and I have noticed stark differences. Even though it was decriminalised where I started, New South Wales, Australia, there was still stigma around it. So even though you could go to the police and it was maybe more of a chance for us to feel like we wanted to, it was still ingrained within the moralistic values of things. So I think until we disentangle our relationship with sex and sexuality and how that sort of peters out through society, will everybody feel like, yes, I can trust and go to the police about this because they're not going to judge me individually and say, sex worker, fuck off.
Do you think the stigma would ever go, even with decriminalisation?
I think that it has already. I mean, I'm sitting here, they've cast me on this thing. They give a shit in some way about my opinion going out there.
Okay.
It has shifted, for sure. And I feel safe enough to be here also and to show my face. It's definitely improved in some countries in the world.
Just a quick question, actually, Abby, if I could ask you really, it's the difference between decriminalisation, the legal side of it, and the sort of sense of social approval, because we seem to be a little bit interchangeable about those two things. Where are you on that?
In terms of my view, I do think that we should decriminalise sex work, but I think that you would need to own the fact that by doing so, you wouldn't necessarily get rid of the concerns that have been highlighted during the course of this conversation. So really it would be more about where do we want to expend our energy? Where should the resource go to? Ultimately, we've got to recognise that the sex industry is vastly women. I think it's something like 88% of sex workers are women, and I imagine that the remainder are likely to be people from queer communities and so on who are also vulnerable. And so we have a very vulnerable workforce who at the moment don't have access to a lot of the protections that they need to have. So I would decriminalise, but I would do so knowing that it does mean that there's potentially more of an onus on police resource, potentially, on seeking out proper healthcare, having regulation in place.
I've always been intrigued by that, actually. Like, what would my industry look like if we had a collective of sex workers who met and decided what our standards would be? You know, in Australia, in New South Wales, we had people coming by to check our OH&S standards, like doorways, wet floors, whatever. So I think that in a lot of ways, workplaces would probably be taken under banners that already existed. And I think that when it came to fair work laws, is that what you call them here? That there's a lot that could already be adopted. But if we're not going to start having that conversation, then there's even more gray, I think.
Okay, all right.
I think that for me personally, it's more about how it's going to impact like the whole of society, because we've already seen like the rise in OnlyFans and the rise in stuff like that, and it does have a negative impact on the younger generation, especially young men. There's more and more creators that are doing OnlyFans, so that means there's a bigger pool of people that you have to choose from as a customer. So each OnlyFans creator is trying to make their content more and more extreme in order to appeal to an audience as someone that's unique. So that's where like more violent sex and more violent pornography is shown and stuff like that.
Which is a bad thing.
Yeah, which obviously is a bad thing. I'm not arguing with the fact that people can't engage in like BDSM and stuff like that, because it's to each their own. However, we shouldn't normalise it and a lot of the people that are watching this content are young men, like young adults, and they are beginning to think that that is the norm and standard of what all women want, where they can go.
So this goes back to the point that Charlie was making earlier,
Yeah.
wasn't it, around like the social acceptance of it
Yeah.
versus the criminalisation of it?
We're the moral corner here.
But I don't think it's about social
I have morals too,
acceptance.
Charlie.
So, but
I don't think it's about social acceptance. I think it's about the impact that it will have.
on society.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't agree with that though. I don't think if I was to see something on the internet and like you just said, two people were doing something, as a man, I wouldn't just think that was normal for me to do that with my partner.
But that's because you're not from like the generation that we are in now. With the rise of like the mindset, like what we call red pill ideology, with like Andrew Tate and stuff like that, that feed into misogyny, I do think it wouldn't be beneficial to decriminalise sex work because there's already so much threat that is going on. Like people are strangling their girlfriends during sex because they think that she likes being choked because they've
But
seen
if
it
she
in
didn't
porn.
like it, would she not refuse to be strangled?
So guys, that's time.
If you go,
There's a lot of things we could talk about.
Yeah, I'm gonna love this next one, mate.
All right, everyone, so we've had the first half of the debate. The votes are in. Let's see what we have ended up with. We have two reds, Nikki and Charlie, and the rest are on green.
It was quite surprising to be voting the same as Charlie, just because we've got such different viewpoints, different ages, different jobs. But I think it was quite comforting to know that someone else was on my side, that I wasn't the only one worried about how it would impact like on a greater scale.
So that means we're going to have a second part of the debate. So you have 15 minutes to try and reach a unanimous decision.
Do you think we can do it?
We can try.
I do, actually.
We can try.
I do think that the safety part of what you were saying is really important, but I can't help but think the bigger picture of what it will do to society, because I don't think you realise how like the red pill ideology feeds into young men. Like they target vulnerable men, and they start saying things that they know they will like, and then it becomes more extreme and more extreme. And I have a question. Do you not think that if we decriminalise sex work, it would be feeding further into the patriarchy rather than being about feminism?
So I think that if I was lucky enough to be afforded a voice, I would speak up. But if I have to hide in the shadows, there's not much that I can say to stand up for myself and other women.
Yeah.
So I think it's very interesting listening to the points, and it's kind of not my wheelhouse, so I kind of feel slightly odd commenting on something like this, but it's very interesting, Nikki, your point around the kind of red pill, Gen Z, because it's kind of your era, right? And something that's quite close to my heart. I've got young kids, young boys growing up. I just think right now, we've mentioned platforms such as OnlyFans and things. They are legal right now. Are we sort of, I think we have to be careful in suggesting that this is affecting a larger proportion of the young male population than we actually think. You know, I don't know the stats around that, so it's difficult for me to give a data-driven sort of decision around that. But I don't think it's as bad as we think it is. So how do we educate? How do we fund that? And how do we make it safer, ultimately, is where I'm coming at. So that's why I want to decriminalise it, because it won't go away. The problem won't go away.
Oh no, I'm not saying
technology won't go away. So how can we fix that?
What's interesting about the point that you're making is around the fact that you're conscious of what the wider ramifications will be of decriminalising sex work. So would it mean that it's more accessible? Would it mean that people who see things online will then start to enact that physically with the women who we have identified, some of whom may be particularly vulnerable in those circumstances? But I think that the counter-argument to that is if you have a system where women are then within a legal system, they are less vulnerable because they are more likely to be able to access mainstream services.
Definitely, if we could find spare money to do this, then I would agree with that. But I think when times are tough and we should prioritise things like the NHS and maybe hold off on this for now.
And I'm interested to say, well, in a world, imagine that money isn't an issue.
Yeah.
Let's answer that question.
Well, I think it will definitely help with like the safety side of things, but I'm still worried about how it's going to impact like the societal impact.
So if you felt that it was done in a way...
Why do you think it impacts society though, because of the way people act?
I genuinely, I do see the impact actually, because I worked in college for a little bit, so I've taught in college, and I have seen 16, 17, 18-year-olds, and I do understand the red pill effect, and I do understand the Andrew Tate effect, so I get that. It comes down to education though, like if you put the money in education and educate these people on what they're watching and educate them the difference between right and wrong, it comes back to your point before, the safety of the person. Like the regulation of the industry allows more education, it allows more safety for the participants in the industry. Everyone has the right to wake up every day and feel safe when they go to work. They shouldn't have to go to work and not feel safe. And if Eva's going to work and not feeling like she can report a concern that she has, then that is not right. That is not a human right. So that trumps everything.
What do we do right now if we do nothing? What happens?
Carries on.
Because the red pill effect, so what I'm curious about, Nikki, I think, is the connection that you're making between the red pill effect, the kind of Andrew Tate and incel culture, and this question here. And I understand that's because you're coming at it from a Gen Z perspective, but I'm not necessarily seeing that there's a direct relationship between the two.
They're not exclusive though. I mean, I think one of the problems you guys have, I'm afraid, with your argument is you're not really talking about decriminalisation, you're talking about a change in criminalisation. If there's regulation, there must be criminalisation. If you have education, it's an either or with legislation. It's very difficult to put in a minimum standard of education. It's something we all want to get to, but you can't say you have to have learnt this thing before you are allowed to be a sex worker, use a sex worker, however you want to.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think in the way that the question has been framed, which is should all sex work be decriminalised, then it's almost binary in the way the question is phrased, right? But I think the reality is that we're being pragmatic about it, which is that the current situation that we have is not meeting the safety concerns.
I completely agree with that, but
there will have to be a point where some aspects of sex work would be criminalised in terms of if it's unsafe, either because of the circumstances in which it's taking place or because of what is happening in the dynamic.
And I would argue then that's not work, that's exploitation.
That's exploitation, correct.
Yeah, but then there's a reason why it's criminalised already.
Yes.
Yeah,
but
I think if we were to decriminalise it, we'd have to make it very clear.
Women couldn't have bank accounts, women couldn't vote, that was illegal.
Nikki,
for a while.
Until a few decades ago, it was legal for a man to rape his wife.
Yeah.
So when we look at the history of legislation around sex, around consent and so on, as a country, we don't have a proud history of getting it right in contemporaneous time, right?
Yeah.
So it's something that we have to be very conscious of. And I think that question of consent, of understanding, of empowerment, of even of feminism, is something that needs to change with time, doesn't it? It needs to adjust to social values. But at the same time, I think what we're all in agreement in, isn't it, is that whatever system is in place needs to be one which adequately protects the safety of the predominantly women who are working in the sex industry. And would we at least agree that at the moment the system that we have doesn't do that?
I think we agree. We agree with all of that.
Yeah.
The only thing we disagree with is that you have to say no to should all sex work be decriminalised, because you can't. You have all argued for regulation, so you lot have to say no to this one.
So you're saying because of the way that the question is framed,
I'm afraid so.
that
It's almost like I'm a lawyer.
It's like
It's got on a technicality.
It's quite legalistic, isn't it, Charlie? It's quite legalistic.
Do you want to swap?
Okay, all right. So your no is on the technicality of the framing of the question.
I'm also broadly aligned to Nikki. I mean, I think if we were to sort of take a kind of colour temperature chart of where we all are, I agree with Nikki. I worry about the Andrew Tate effect, for example.
Can I ask a question? Why do you keep talking about Andrew Tate? Is the only person you can mention?
No, he's very prominent in how he influences young men.
He's one person, so like.
It's not just him. He's been in prison for like a few years now. But there's people that take after what he was saying and make their own YouTube channels and spread the message that he was trying to spread. He was the beginning of
He's the tip
everything
of the
that
iceberg.
of everything that spiraled after he got convicted and went
And
to
there's a
prison.
lot of trafficking that happens that isn't also on the internet, right? But it's,
Yeah, no, of
again,
course.
it's the question of what is exploitation and what is a choice. And I make a choice versus somebody who would force somebody else.
Yeah,
they're
I
not
think-
the same thing.
I think what is like holding me back from this is the curb crawling, because wouldn't making curb crawling legal put other women at threat that are not sex workers?
The thing with like streetwalkers is that like a lot of the time, it's people who don't have access to understanding how to advertise. It's like it's
they
a
need
very
business
low
training
barrier of
almost, don't
entry,
they?
basically.
Yeah.
But the thing is, if you had maybe facilities or structures that people could have mentorship, apprentice, like just a little bit more community that could freely happen, maybe they would have better opportunities
Yeah,
around
you wouldn't
that.
have to do the street walking.
The thing is, like, even all of these small anecdotal things that I'm having, there's huge studies that have been done internationally that all have come to the point, Amnesty International, WHO, UNAIDS, and who all come to the understanding that decriminalization is the only way for sex workers to be safe and the only way for trafficking
To stop.
And going
To be
back to
reduced.
your back to your point, Charlie. So the question is, should all sex work be decriminalised? Not should all sex work be legalised? So my understanding of decriminalisation is that it allows for regulation. So for example, if you look at cannabis and the decriminalisation of cannabis in certain areas, you still have a licensing position in between. So we're not saying that you should have a lack of legal framework around it. I think decriminalisation allows for a legal framework to be in place.
There's a
doesn't it?
semantic
You should have said this
difference
beforehand. I didn't know that.
Maybe I should.
there. Just a matter of interest, Evie, how much does
Sorry,
tolerance
Charlie, we're
play a
out of
part?
time, big guy.
All right, so everyone, the second debate has now finished, and we will now find out what the decision was.
I don't want to look.
Told you. Told you.
Clean sweep, I like it.
All
Nice.
green.
Yeah, I knew that.
Thank you for thinking of my safety.
Love that.
So members of the jury, you were asked, should all sex work be decriminalised? And you have unanimously voted.
Oh, we got unanimous.
Yes.
Thank you.
Fantastic.
Well argued.
What changed your minds?
I'll tell you. No. Yeah, the last bit, the, very last
point,
bit.
Yeah.
Yeah,
It was
with
a regulation.
decriminalised does not mean legalised.
Legalised is
Yeah,
different, yeah.
If I knew that before, my stance would have been
Yeah, I
different.
probably should
but-
have said that
I
at the
didn't know that.
It was
It's my bad.
cracker to bring it right at the end.
You got lawyered, Charlie. That's what you
Got
got.
lawyer.
I got lawyer.
Full on
Got
lawyer.
lawyer.
You got full on
The
lawyer.
first time in my life either.
I doubt that.
Nikki's stand as our Gen Z participant was against the decriminalization of sex work. To be honest, her points around red pilling and male vulnerability and identity were not a huge surprise to me. I think that this is an issue, but it's not one that's directly correlated to sex work, and I'm glad that we were able to talk about that more.
So yeah, I did change my mind in the last minute, but that was because Abby did state that decriminalising does not mean legalising all of the work. I think a lot of the second half of the conversation was about regulating and the rules that we would be put in place, the clarity, the definitions and stuff like that that would be put in place if it was to be decriminalised. If everything went the way that we wanted it to go, then I think it would be a good idea.
You are fighting for your country. If your country loses that war,
A conscripted military is completely different in nature to a voluntary military.
needs must.
Just think about what you're saying.
I was gonna say if someone knocked on my door and told me that I'm going to war tomorrow, I'd just be like, shoot me now. Do you know what I mean?